Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg. And, it's summer's winding down and getting ready to send my kid back to college. And, there's always mixed emotions. And for me, those emotions, as you know, ride pretty high. And it's all because of this sensitivity and care that I've always had that leads to that. And I think that's going to be an interesting part of the conversation with my guest today. My guest is Matt Pappas. Matt is a blogger, podcast host, author, and advocate for trauma survivors and mental health awareness through his website and work called Surviving My Past. It's very familiar to me because I think another person I know might have done that. He's also studying to become a certified life and recovery coach, like another person I know. So I told him earlier, I said, I think we're brothers from another mother. So we kind of heading down the same path, wanting to help people, probably having learned from our past. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me, man. It's my pleasure, dude.
Hey, so tell me, how did you get started? What was your precipice? Because I know it's really hard for a lot of people to understand why we come forward, why us survivors, and I like to call us survivors, and you do too, obviously, come forward and speak so bluntly about the issues around our past and how we had to overcome it.
Well, I got started with my blog in February 2016 after having had worked with a professional therapist for about a year or so before that. And, we started working through my past and the trauma that I endured. And I started journaling to myself, just writing, getting my thoughts out, which is always encouraged and helpful,
Right.
Oftentimes when you're working with a professional. And so I was doing that for several months and found it very therapeutic and very enlightening, very validating, very powerful. And I had to brainstorm one day of, because of the past that I have with creating websites and running forums and, bulletin boards and that kind of thing, that, I thought, maybe I'll make a website and put my stuff online and see if anybody might care to read it. And so I came up with the name Surviving My Past one day at about 2:30 in the morning, laying in bed one night when I couldn't sleep. So it hit me and I jumped up and bought the domain that night. And then survivingmypast.net was born. A day or two later, actually, after that, I had my first blog post up and everything was rolling February 4th, 2016. So I decided to really start telling my story because I found out how powerful and validating it was to speak about your past and to open up about it and to talk through it and to seek the support of others. And by doing that, I realized that I wasn't alone just in the office there with my therapist at the time. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do some research, see if anybody else out there might be doing the same thing. And, lo and behold, there were other bloggers and other people who were sharing their story on, their own websites or on social media and what have you. And I thought, well, there's other people doing this. Why can't I do it? So I started reading other people's stuff and found out how good it made me feel to know I wasn't alone by reading their stuff. And I realized that other people might be able to feel encouraged and inspired by reading my work. So, I started to put out more and more posts, and that's kind of how it was born, was just out of the need to reach out for support and to no longer be ashamed and keep everything stuffed away in the corner of my mind like I had done for the past 30-something years.
It sounds very familiar. I started mine in 2007, and it started just with me writing, all my own bullying stories, and it was called Bullying Stories. And then everyone started sending me their stories, and next thing I knew, I was 1.4 million people reading it and using it. And it was like, whoa, what happened?
Right?
Because people, I think, identify with the voice that we speak, that you speak when you talk about it. So tell me, what is Surviving My Past? What happened? What was it that haunted you for all those years and that you finally let go of?
Well, when I was a child, between the ages of 5 and 10, somewhere during that time frame, the exact ages and times are really I've never really pinpointed it down, but sometime between the ages of 5 and 10, I was sexually abused by a teenager up the street who was literally like less than a block from my house. That his family knew my family, he knew me, and of course, me being a young kid and this guy being a teenager, 16-ish years old. He had done this to me multiple times, probably more than I recall. And then as I got older, that led to a lot of insecurities, a lot of self-esteem issues, a
Mm.
lack of confidence growing up. And so that made me a perfect target for bullying in late elementary school and all through my middle school years up. I would say probably through my freshman year was when it really started to kind of die off a little bit, for lack of a better term. But for those multiple years, it was a lot of bullying in school, outside of school. I mean, emotional, physical,
Yeah,
verbal abuse
yeah,
of all kinds. And so that's kind of what Surviving My Past is about. It's that, along with surviving the emotional neglect and narcissistic abuse of a caregiver growing up as well. So it's
yeah.
kind of a trifecta that landed me in the world of being bullied and living with dissociation and anxiety, realizing that I had developed PTSD throughout all of this.
Hmm.
And so I like to say that Surviving My Past is in support of all who have survived the trauma of abuse, because abuse, whether it's narcissistic or it's childhood sexual abuse or it's emotional abuse or neglect or whatever it is that you suffered, everybody has, everybody who suffered that type of thing has a past that haunts them, and a past that needs to be overcome.
Right.
And that's kind of where Surviving My Past was born, was learning what it, that I was a victim, and then moving into survivor mode and then to thriver mode, and learning what all of that meant, and really just having an outlet for me to share my story, and an outlet for me to get my thoughts out there to reach other people. And of course, similar to the way the years turned out, it's blossomed into something now where people approach me to share their story of
Right.
survival and of recovery. So, which is even more amazing when you get people who are learning, and some of them are learning to share their story for the very first time in public, and it's very powerful stuff. And I take their stories very seriously, and I'm so
Hmm.
honored that they allow me to help share their story. So, and of course, since then, it's blossomed into more than just my story, but encompassing many, many guest bloggers who have come forward and who I've met online and whatnot, who just want to reach out and inspire others and tell the world that they are not ashamed of the past that they endured.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head. What we understand now is really this. It's now called for us complex PTSD because it happened to us when we were young. It happened due to
Absolutely.
abuse, not because of war. I work with a lot of military, so they'll say, "Well, PTSD is military," but it's the same. The end result is the end result. If you went to war and you suffer from PTSD, you're going to be suffering from the same issues that abuse victims, that survivors of bullying, that all of this do. And that's really the end result. The end result is a psychological diagnosis of what's going on, not the least of which you mentioned is the self-esteem, really the total loss of belief in self. And I'm sure you probably did what I did, which was mask. You put on a mask, you put on this face, you became who you thought other people wanted you to be. I know I spent so much time trying to get people to like me, but I hated myself, right? You hate yourself because of this thing that happened to you. And so what really was amazing to me on my journey was really discovering how widespread that was. Meeting you, like you're one of hundreds of people I met that we could tell the same story at the end of the day. We may not have come from the story at the same angle, but at the end, recovery to helping others to having this empathy, which is really what it is, empathy for other people's problems and being able to speak to that because we're empathetic. So what have you found? Like, what have you found, like, as you've taken this journey, and it's a little more recent than mine, has been some of the most dramatic moments for you as people, as you've written and talked about your recovery. And what people don't really understand is everyone can write, but not everybody's a writer. Everybody can speak, but not everybody's a speaker. And so I always feel like I'm the voice for those that don't. And I just actually wrote a blog article for someone else. They wrote it, but I published it, and they didn't want to be the person in front. So what have you found through your experience has been some of the most dramatic parts of what has been the outcome of surviving my past?
Well, you mentioned a lot of good things there just now. The complex PTSD, which of course, as we know, as you mentioned, is something where you endure trauma over a long period of time repeatedly, and that's something that I have really learned. That so many survivors live with, obviously, including myself, and I think it's great that you drive that point home, because I think not everybody understands, what complex PTSD is. And, as you mentioned, so many people just think of PTSD as the military. And of course, not that we would ever minimize that, but it goes so much greater than that with any type of, trauma that you endure, be it abuse or be it natural disasters or anything that happens that, can bring on the onset of PTSD or CPTSD. And, so I love that you brought that up, because I think so many people just are now learning that they do have PTSD, and that they can kind of put a name to and to what they've been suffering for so long. So,
Right.
As far as some of the most dramatic moments, I think I've really learned a lot in my own writing in terms of the topic of dissociation and dissociative disorders, and how many people live with some type of dissociation in their daily life from the past trauma. But when I first was meeting with a therapist, back in the day, well, not back in the day, but a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
at the time, and she mentioned the word dissociation. I'm like, what the hell's dissociation? And
Yeah.
then and I went and she started explaining to me about what it is, and I started doing research, and I'm like, yes, that's me. I do that.
Yeah.
And then, she said about having PTSD, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Yes, that's me. That happens to me. All these things that you're bringing up are happening to me. So some of the most dramatic moments came out of writing and working with a therapist, and then a coach after that, and just being able to find a definition as to what I was feeling, and then be able to research and find out that I'm not alone, and that there are so many people who live with similar types of circumstances and challenges because of the past trauma. So that is like incredibly validating and encouraging. Just the idea to know that you are not alone is probably the biggest dramatic thing that's ever come out of my writing, this website, the podcast, the videos, everything, is just understanding that I am not alone, that nobody's ever alone, and that there's hope
Oh, yeah.
to overcome your past. Because as trauma survivors, people who have endured bullying, people who have endured any type of abuse, it's all about trying to embrace hope. And for so long, we didn't think there was any,
Yeah.
or we didn't think that we deserved to feel any hope. And so that's one of the biggest things, is that. And then also, I would say something else is just the resiliency of people to just keep going and not give up. And, understanding that when I read a blog post of somebody who has been through horrific, I mean, just unbelievable, repeated sexual abuse,
Yeah.
religious abuse, narcissistic abuse, anything, being bullied their entire life, whatever it is, these people are sharing their story, and it's them just coming out in their writing, in their own words. And I'm amazed and inspired and humbled and just in awe and encouraged by the fact that these people are still here. They're still fighting every day. They're still trying to reach for the life that they want and to overcome their past. And it's really just inspiring when you reach out and connect with people. And, as you mentioned, you and I have very similar stories. And I mean, heck, we even half look alike, which is really great.
Yeah.
But, just to really understand the resiliency of people. And, so often, Many of these people, unfortunately, resort to, suicide attempts.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
I've read a lot of blogs, and I've talked to a lot of people who, have unfortunately attempted suicide, and they're still here, thank goodness. And their story is helping so many people. So, I would say the inspiring resiliency is another one of the biggest things that I've learned about not only myself, of course, but
Mhm.
everybody else.
Well, I think, yeah, when I first started, and then I allowed other people to write their stories, one of the first things that struck me was people's stories were so much worse than mine. It's like I had these stories, and that's, I, as I tell people, I say everybody's life is their own. And I'm sure you've gone through this too, but in your analysis of self, how come it happened to me? How come this? And I've only recently really realized that I'm an introverted, extroverted, highly sensitive male, which is a real thing. It's not like some made up
Absolutely.
thing. It's this real personality aspect, and you do all this research and you find out, and it's important almost to find out who you are and why you're affected. Why? Because not everybody is affected, but they are damaged, and they can be damaged. It's just those of us, I think, that are in this sort of high sensitivity, and I'm not going to say I can read you, but I think we are the people that come out and say we're going to help others are doing it because we're highly sensitive, where we have that empathetic feeling that we want to share to others. And you mentioned how feeling alone, and I always tell this funny story that I'm very much, I did therapy, I did all the same things you did, but I was also really addicted to self-help and really wanted to help myself. And so I was reading this one book about anxiety. I was having these awful anxiety attacks, and one of them that just blew my mind was I'd go to get a haircut, and the barber would put that thing on, a smock around me, and I would feel claustrophobic. I would just, I got to get out of this seat, I got to get out of here. And I'm like, I'm totally crazy. I'm like, this is it. Like, who goes to the barber, has this thing put around their head, and starts to feel panic attack? And then I'm reading this book, and it's like some people go to the barber and have a panic attack when they put the thing around their neck. And I'm like, I'm not alone.
Right?
I'm not even close to alone. There's probably, and I think that's the greatest gift that you're giving, is that fact that you're helping people realize they're not alone. Because I think it's that loneliness that leads to the suicide, to the feeling that nobody understands me, right? That's where you finally start to realize that's where your healing is and where others are. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about the anxiety, and anxiety is something that so many people live with. I mean, the last stat that I read was over 40 million people in the United States alone live with some type of anxiety disorder.
Oh yeah.
And that's just something that's, classified as an anxiety disorder. Not even those who live with other, just, live with daily anxiety and maybe don't, realize that they are, or, but, anxiety manifests itself in so many ways. For you, it was going to the barber. For others, it's, going out in public. It's sharing
Yeah.
their story. It's going out with friends. It's going to work. Some people have anxiety about just going to the grocery store. I mean, there are so many factors that just really can take anxiety to a whole nother level. And oftentimes we don't understand, and we think we're crazy, and there's no hope for us. And we start to blame ourselves and shame ourselves, and we wonder what in the world's wrong with us. And then like you, I'm kind of addicted to self-help as well. And that, like, as soon as I realized that I was a survivor, I started reading books, and I started
Hmm.
watching videos, and and reading blogs, and I'm like, oh my God, this is me, and that's me, and I do this, and I feel that way, and this guy's telling my story, and this book is amazing. And so I started doing all this research and learning how the brain is damaged during traumatic
Hmm.
situations, and how
Hmm.
there's hope and healing, and you're creating new neural pathways, and there's all these different types of things that you can do on your own behalf when you simply understand what happened. And then you can start to retrain your brain and retrain your thoughts and do things on your own behalf, and take care of yourself with self-care and all these types of things that you can advocate for, and really just understand that like in my case, how the trauma of my past affects my anxiety today. And now,
Right.
and for so long, I had no idea that the two were ever intertwined at all. But of course, we know that they are.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, and going back to the bullying or the abuse or whatever it is, and so yeah, I absolutely I find that when you really start to help yourself and just reach out and see how other people are doing the same things you are, or when somebody asks you what do you do, and you give them some suggestions or tips, and they're like, yes, that worked awesome for me. I mean, that's like the greatest feeling ever.
Yeah, yeah. And we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'd like to talk more sort of about how we've learned to help ourselves, and how I think we have some advice around that, and what we do, what you're doing, and how you're moving forward now. So if you'll hold on a second, Matt, we'll be right back with more Healthy You. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here today with Matt Pappas, who is the founder of Surviving My Past. And we've been talking about what it means for us both to have survived our past. And where we left it, Matt, was we were talking a little bit about anxiety and how that's just so common. And I know I know people through the work I've done, haven't left their house in 10 years, haven't even ventured out. How have you found success overcoming anxiety? What do you think is really at the heart of your success, I guess, as you work through it?
Well, I think one of the biggest things in my battle with anxiety and learning how to overcome it and deal with it on a daily basis so it doesn't rule my life is understanding that anxiety loves to use our vulnerabilities against us, and it loves to lie to us. And I say that because I'm a big fan of a good friend of mine and psychotherapist Jody Amen, who's like an anxiety warrior. She wrote a book called You Want Anxiety Zero, which I read through the book every Sunday morning on Periscope at 11 a.m. and we read a chapter at a time, and we discuss beating anxiety. But I've read this book obviously a couple of times, and one of the things, the first time I read it, was understanding that anxiety tries to tell you all kinds of lies. It tries to use all kinds of tricks. It tries to use everything and anything in your past against you, and that anxiety is relentless.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are things that, when you understand that, anxiety isn't happy with just, kind of making you feel bad for a while during the day, and then, it leaves you alone. Like anxiety wants to pile on, take every feeling that you have, make it 100 times worse, make you feel like you're wrong, make you feel like there's no hope, that nobody's going to listen to you, that everything's going to be awful, that you're crazy, there's no point in going on, everything is scary, everything tries to confuse you, like all these different tricks that anxiety uses. It uses, I like to kind of use the analogy very often of a scale, and, anxiety likes to tip the scale in its own favor. And so, just like a scale, when anxiety has power, you lose power.
Mm-hmm.
when anxiety is really just pouring on the pressure and tightening its grip, and you're in the middle of a panic attack, or you're in the middle of a state of depression, you don't want to leave your house, you're afraid to go anywhere, you're thinking that everybody's judging you, that nobody likes you. I mean everything that anxiety tells you. I mean, we could be here for hours covering that,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
But understanding that when anxiety has that power, you're losing power. And one of the best and easiest and quickest ways to really start to take your power back with anxiety is to question it.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, absolutely. If you question anxiety, you immediately start to take the power back in your favor.
Yeah, and actually, what people, it's interesting as you've gone through sort of exercise therapy, I'm sure, and I have too, and how to deal with it. And I actually tell people, this show itself, and I'm sure when you do it, this is a form of therapy for me. This is, just to talk about it, right? Is therapy. Not holding it back. And that's, I think, the beauty of the modern world, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, is we're not entrapped in having to keep secrets anymore. This is okay to talk about. And that's the first thing. But the other thing that was amazing to me was to learn how that, your mind does not control you. You control your mind. But if you let it, it will control you. So you're at a constant war, right, with this thing called your mind, that when it's broken, as you and I both refer to, it will start to act this way. It will start to create anxiety. It will start to create stress. It will start to create depression. And these things are a natural progression from, what I say, stress is is what I like to call the gateway illness, right? So we start with stress. So stress leads to the anxiety, which leads to the depression, which leads to the, so forth. But one of the most interesting techniques, and then what anxiety is I like Dr. David Burns. He wrote a great book called Feeling Good, where he talks about twisted thinking styles, and you get into sort of that all or nothing thinking. Everything's anxiety thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you hit on something that I learned and have learned to do, which is your body starts to react in an anxious manner, panic attack usually of some sort. And if you can start to become a third party to your body, so now you're using your mind, you're trying to fight your mind, and you're saying, why is my body doing this to me right now? That's incredibly powerful. If you can get to that point of questioning why your body is reacting, because one of the things we forget is that fight or flight is not an anxiety. It's something that every animal in the animal kingdom has. It's an instinct. And what happens is ours gets broken due to abuse. We become disassociated, and I love that term, with what might be a threat and what might not be a threat. So our body starts to react as if everything's a threat, which is what anxiety is doing. So really, that's one of those really interesting things about the dissociative part of the disorder is we have to reverse that in our mind, right?
Absolutely, you do. Yes. And you touched on a lot of great points there. And I think one of the biggest things is to understand why you're reacting the way that you are. And you're right. The fight or flight is a response that you're born with. I mean, it's there to help protect you.
Right.
And so, but you're right. As trauma survivors, of any type of trauma, all the factors that go into fight or flight are damaged and broken, and they're running full speed 100 miles an hour all the time, rather than being in the normal rhythm and cycle, of chemicals going through your body, and, being able to react to stress in a healthy way, and understand when you should, fight, when you should flee, when something isn't as big of a deal as what your mind wants you to be, wants you to think that it is. And one of the best ways to do that I found and I've learned is simply questioning it. Because when you're in the middle of a stressful situation, when your mind starts to race and wonder, and you start to feel anxious, and you start to realize, oh man, I'm starting to lose control here. Things are going bad. That you're living in the emotional moment right there. You're caught up in the emotion, and when you do that, you don't think clearly. You don't make rational decisions. You can't advocate on your own behalf because your mind's going 100 miles an hour trying to figure out what's going on, and you've got all these emotions flying by and so the key is to really learn to pause, take a step back, and assess the situation, kind of look at it from the outside and say, okay, wait a minute. Is this really that bad? Should I really have a reason to be scared? Is something really going to happen? Am I safe now or am I not safe? Is what happened in the past going to happen to me now? Anything, depending on the situation, everything's different, but to be able to separate yourself and say, okay, rationally, am I safe? Rationally, is something going to happen to me right now? And question it. And like I said, as soon as you question anxiety, it starts to lose its power, and then you start to gain your power. So you're tipping the scales back in your favor. And so that's like an amazing way to start advocating on your own behalf. And the more you do it, the more empowered you get, and the less power that anxiety has. And when it does creep up, you can say to yourself, hey, anxiety, I see you. I know what you're trying to do. I know what this feels like, but I'm okay now. You're not going to take over my life. You're not going to take over this situation. I'm safe, et cetera, whatever the case may be. And then you're able to analyze it, see it for what it is for a few minutes. And then you say, okay, I can go on with life. I can go do what I was going to do. And, it takes practice. And the first time I heard about doing this, I'm like, there's no way I can do that. I'm like, what do you mean question anxiety? But like, you literally say, wait a minute, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Am I safe? And then you start to realize it's not often nearly as bad as what your mind wants you to think it is based on your past. So
yeah, I have kind of two funny stories. I think you could tell me, here's what the anxieties. One thing we were talking about, you're going to spend a lifetime. Like, this is all practice. Like, today you might not be anxious. Tomorrow you might be anxious, and you can't go tomorrow, well, from now on I'm afraid I'm going to be anxious.
Right.
You just start the next day and start the next day. And I remember for me, one of the weird anxieties I had was a fear of not being able to get to a bathroom in time. And it was like,
right.
It was like, so it was keeping me from going anywhere, right? Or taking a metro or taking a plane or whatever have you, where I would feel trapped and not be able to get to a bathroom. And I still remember to this day, the therapist I was talking to at the time, he's like, so when has this happened to you in your life? And I'm like, never. He goes, okay, so it's never happened. And you're how old? 40 something. And he's like, and then if it did happen, what would you do? And he just started walking me, and I'm like, gosh, your mind is not letting you think that way. But that's really it. It's like and then this is of course a therapeutic method, but it's like makes you start realizing that these thoughts are unrealistic. You're trying to predict. You're trying to assume that what happened before is going to happen again. And if you count how many days you've been around, or if you don't treat everything the same as like a new day, a new start, then you're going to keep doing it. So I can admit, I still have anticipatory anxiety. If I'm going somewhere strange, if I'm getting ready to go to a big event or anything, I just kind of start to get sort of angry, upset, tense. My wife knows it, my kids know it, and it's like, I can't, I'm working on it. One day it's great, the next it's not. But I think that's the other part, is to admit, you're working on it. That not that you're looking to conquer it. That maybe tomorrow you'll treat just a little better,
Yeah, you're exactly right. And this journey of healing, no matter what it's from, it is a daily thing, and there's going to be good days, there's going to be tough days, and you're right. Trying to anticipate the future, trying to grab control of something that you can't control of, can be very terrifying, frustrating, cause a lot of emotions. I mean, especially for somebody who's a trauma survivor. Oftentimes there was no control. Like, we had no control over our lives. So now as we get older, we start to try and control everything, and you realize you can't control everything, especially the future. And you can't go back and undo the past. So then you're in this like perpetual cycle of, well, I'm trying to control stuff I can't control, and I'm trying to undo things that I can't undo. And it's just this horrible cycle. So you just realize that, you're going to go one day at a time, one situation at a time. And, if you have something that comes up that causes you, to feel a bit of, an anxiety attack, or feel anxious, or get emotional or angry, but then you understand, okay, you know what, it happened. This is what happened. I know why it happened. I'm going to learn from it and move forward. And then the next time you just try and work through it better. And you might have a whole bunch of bad things, but then you eventually start to get through a cycle of, dealing with things healthy again. It's just part of life, and understanding that, you can't control what's going to happen the next day, the next hour, but you can control how you react. And, whether you react healthy or unhealthy way, positively, negatively, whatever you want to say, there's always another chance coming up.
Yeah. And one of the things I learned as I became a coach was sort of how to handle things, where as a young person, I would just freak out when at work, when I was tasked. Oh my God, do this. And the other day I was sitting at work and we were talking about something, and I'm bogged under right now, I have to admit. And I'm proud of myself because I'm sitting there, and I manage people now, which is tough for someone like me. But this other person who is talked to me, who knows about my story and was talkative, she's like, how can you just sit there so calm and like be rationalizing and making decisions? And I said, I'm just done with that. That part of me that used to do that, like, we're going to have to get the work done, whether, I panic or not. So I've learned, what's the worth of doing this anxiety panic around it, that I just lose a half hour of time I could just be getting the work done.
Right.
And she's like, wow, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. So I know you are also working to become a coach, and it was such a wonderful experience for me to become a coach and learn the skills sort of about how to be a great listener, which is really what coaches do. Why did you choose that, sort of in that same path I am, and how are you hoping to help others through it?
Well, I've spent really all of my life, as far as my adult working life, just doing the safe type of, job, where, you go to work for 8 hours, 10 hours a day, whatever it is, you have a paycheck every week or two, you have benefits, you take care of yourself, your family, and you're done. And so to me, that was a very unfulfilling, I found over the years, and, here more of late, that I wasn't emotionally fulfilled. I wasn't satisfied with where I was going. Yes, I am grateful that I have a job. I am thankful beyond belief that I have one. But I know that after 40-something years, I have finally found my calling and know what I'm really supposed to be doing with my life. And, whether it took me a long time to find it or not, I'm glad that I found it. And that really is, it was born out of my recovery journey of working with a therapist and then a coach, and blogging and podcasting and videos, and, doing shows like this with you, and interacting with the survivor community, and understanding that, I believe that, the things that I've endured, and the way that I've been able to overcome them, and the way that I still, have a daily healing journey like everybody else, it's just empowered me to reach out into this world of advocacy and, coaching. And, that's why I chose to start my, going through the certification and training process to be, a life transition and recovery coach, because, I want to be able to reach people in the way that I was reached, and help them the way that I was helped. And especially, when it comes to people who are in major life transitions with family, career, jobs, relationships, people who are trauma survivors and trying to find their way through life. I've been through all that. I'm going through that. And I know that there's hope, because, I'm seeing that there's hope firsthand, and I want to help. For so long, I never embraced that I could do anything other than just the safe, quote unquote, 9-to-5 gig. And, I realized I wanted more out of life. And, I wanted to not only be able to pay my bills, but I wanted to be able to help people, and to wake up every day embracing the opportunity of life and embracing what's coming instead of dreading it and just, working for somebody else and just, kind of having this mentality of I'm just a number and whether or not I show up ultimately doesn't really matter that much. And, when you're a
Yep.
coach and when you're in an advocate role, the fact that you show up for your clients, for the people you work with, for the people that you blog to and write to and podcast to, it matters that you're there showing up and they appreciate it. And I know that, you know, I was so grateful that my therapist and coach at the time woke up every day and worked with me, during the times that they did. And I'm honored and I'm humbled by what they were able to do for me. And I really want to look forward to doing that with other people. So that's really kind of the reason for my calling is I just want to take my, what I've learned so far and what I'm continuing to learn to the next level to be able to help other people in similar ways that I was helped.
Yeah, and I always tell the same story, sort of like how we got these journeys, and I still remember the day when I started feeling better, and I kind of ended my therapy with my therapist, and sort of at the very end I asked him one question, and it was really simple, and his answer was so telling, and it was why did you decide to become a therapist? And he just looked at me, and he said, Alan, you know why. And I'm like, why do you want to be a coach? You know why.
Yep.
It's like I've been there and I want to be there for others. And I think that's just a great thing, and I wish you luck on your journey to coaching. I've had some wonderful experiences as a coach. And it's tough sometimes because you just really are a listener and really let the people, just like you and I had to have our journeys, they need to have their journeys, and you're just there to help them along their journey. And so sometimes I want to tell them so much like what we're talking about. And I just have to be, okay, well, this is your journey and you tell me what you want to do and I'll help you get there. So I have one question that I ask everybody, and then I really want you to tell people how they can get in touch with you because you're doing such wonderful work. But what would you say is the biggest change you've made in your life to live a happier and healthier life now?
The one change would be, I would probably say, actually beyond a doubt, I would say embracing my own potential and embracing the possibilities of what's ahead instead of dreading it. And really just kind of changing my outlook in life. I used to wake up every day just, as I said, dreading work and dreading getting up and dreading going to the job and dreading coming home and, dreading change. And whenever something would come up, I would anticipate the worst, and I would just blow it way out of proportion and catastrophize it immensely. And really, I was my own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've been on this journey of healing and going through the coaching and the blogging and everything that I've been doing, I've been able to change my mindset to this outlook of apathy and or dread to anticipation and excitement of what's coming. And it's really been, it's really just been me getting out of my own way.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, because I know that all along it's been me that's been stopping me. And once I understood that, part of that was born from the trauma and the abuse and the failed relationships and other things that have happened. Now I understand, but I'm like, you know what? That happened. It sucked. It was terrible, but I'm still here. And now I'm moving forward and I'm going to do, amazing things now with, my life and helping people. So changing my own mindset and getting out of my own way is probably the biggest thing, the biggest change that started to propel me and continues to do so.
Yeah, it's great, and for me, it was saying my life isn't one journey; it's all these journeys, and once it's over, and move on to the next journey.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let this one bad thing happen spoil the rest of your journey of your life. You're not just born middle age and dead, and pay taxes. That's not the story. And if that's the way you think, it's time you get out of that thinking. So that's I'm proud that you've been able to get there and be a survivor like me and so many in the audience that listen to me and listen to the words that you've gotten to say, which are great. So how can people reach out to get in touch with you? Where are you available at on the web?
Well, of course, you can find me on my blog, which is survivingmypast.net. That's where the blog is. You can. That's where the podcasts are. There's links to the Periscope videos that I do every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As we work through the skills to beat anxiety. And of course, there's contact forms on the website. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Surviving My Past. And of course, now, as I mentioned, I'm studying to be a coach. I have a crowdfunding link to try and help, kind of get this off the ground. All that is linked on the website as well. And the new website, which is coming the fall of 2017, for my coaching program, is going to be called Beyond Your Past. And that's going to be my coaching website with all the information about working with me and, the specialties that I will be able to help people with and whatnot. So, you can find me at survivingmypast.net, and in the future and in later 2017 at Beyond Your Past.
Great. Well, and I will definitely help promote that, and it'll be available with the podcast here. So thank you so much, Matt, for what you're doing, for being honest, coming on my show and sharing your story, which I think collectively, as we all share these things and people get to listen to them and hear that they're not alone, I think that's the most powerful thing that we can all learn from each other, is that we're not alone at no time. So thank you for being on the show and sharing that.
Absolutely, Alan. It's my pleasure, man. I appreciate the opportunity, dude.
Okay, and I look forward to maybe future conversations we can have.
Absolutely.
So this is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You. Please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.